Once, there was an opportunity for Jiang Hao to invest in a small breakthrough. But what should Jiang Hao do if his deposit is less than 2,000? That's certainly selling the house and becoming the biggest independent investor in Little Pok. Keywords of the novel. Starting from selling houses and investing in stray water polo without pop-ups, starting from selling houses and investing in stray water polo. Download the full text, starting from selling houses and investing in stray water polo. Latest chapters to read. Chapter 1, This is Waterball. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, This is Waterball, Xiao He, why are you doing things in a daze today? Be careful not to make mistakes, otherwise the supervisor will eat you. Seeing He Zheng almost fall down on another plate, a colleague on the side quickly reminded him. It's okay, I just stayed up late last night to watch a movie too aggressively, I didn't sleep all night. He Zheng explained. He didn't lie, he did stay up late to watch a movie, and then woke up to find himself back 30 years ago. I just entered society at the age of 20 and worked as a waiter in a 5-star hotel. So all day long, He Zheng felt a bit dazed because he constantly had to accept the impact of the memory gap between two eras and more than 30 years. To be honest, if He Zheng hadn't watched too many movies about time travel and instinctively accepted a large number of related settings, he might have been driven crazy by these two memories. But soon, He Zheng realized that he didn't seem to be reborn, at least not simply reborn, but reborn and traversed. I am currently not on Earth, but on a planet called Waterball. Although the two planets have some similarities, there are also many differences, which is a completely different world from Earth. For example, on Earth, it should be around 2017, but on this water sphere, it is around 3017 AD. And the first year of AD is not the birthday of any deity, but the first year established by the Zhou dynasty. In 485 AD, later on, the Confucian sage Yanzi proposed the idea of inheriting the Zhou ritual, believing that time should be recorded in the first year of the founding of the Zhou dynasty to facilitate the clarification of history. This idea was ignored by no one at that time, until 1,000 years later, Lu Xiu, the founding ruler of the Eastern Han dynasty and also a disciple of Confucianism, decided to promote the concept of sages. Therefore, starting from the Eastern Han dynasty, the imperial court began to use two sets of chronological systems simultaneously. One set is the original era name chronology, and the other set is the AD chronology. However, because AD chronology is about mastering history and learning knowledge is too convenient, gradually only the AD chronology is popular among the people. Later, during the Yuan dynasty briefly unified the Eurasian continent, so the AD system naturally spread to the world. Anyway, the history of this world is a bit too dense for the Earth. Of course, for water polo people, the history of the Earth is also too densely packed. However, there are more similarities in the history of the two worlds. For example, they have always been a continuation of Xia, Shang, Zhou, Qin, Han, Sui, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. Except for some slight differences in historical details, they are basically a set of historical events that run through them. But after He Zheng had sorted his head properly, he suddenly asked the person beside him, "Old soy milk, how many years is it today, what date is it in a certain month? Don't you know when you look at the mobile phone?" I said seriously, "Why do you ask such a ridiculous question? It's the same as what is written in the Rebirth novel." The colleague named Leodunai complained. Actually, He Zhenggang has just checked his phone and confirmed the time, but he still wants to confirm some things from his colleagues. "Are there any guests at Xuemei's place today?" He Zheng asked again. "Yes, it's already noon and we've been eating for several hours." "Why are you asking this?" "It's nothing, we just need to do something big." He Zheng grinned. What he saw before crossing the river was not a real movie, but a documentary that tells the development history of the entire 6 films in the Little Pok series. The most interesting and bumpy story is naturally Little Pok 1. tell the story of how much effort and cost the director of Little Pok Ball put in to secure an investment. And in this documentary, there is something that surprised Jiang himself, which is that he once had such a momentary intersection with Xiaopo. According to the director's recollection in the documentary, the film was led by Yanjing Culture and jointly funded by several companies. The total investment is 300 million yuan, of which 60 million yuan is invested by Wanyu Company. However, Wanyu Company fell in love with another romantic movie, but suddenly had funds in hand. Therefore, they decided to withdraw their investment in Little Ball and instead invest in the romantic comedy film Middle-Aged Love Saint. Guo Fan said that this news made him so scared that he couldn't sleep all night. The next day, he went straight to the best hotel in Yanjing. In a private room called Shuame, he took out his entire month's salary to treat the owner of Wanyu Film to dinner. Just one table of dishes cost nearly 30,000 yuan, but there was no result. In the end, Wanyu Film Company withdrew 60 million yuan from its investment, and the entire small breakthrough will also face a crisis of complete financial chain rupture. At this point, Director Guo, who had already achieved great success in later generations, still showed an uncontrollable sadness and indignation on his face, while saying a very classic sentence, 30,000 yuan. If I had known that all these 30,000 yuan were fed to pigs, I might as well have created another special effect for the camera. But seeing this, Jiang was all shocked, because wasn't Shuame the hotel private room he had just entered society and started working in? In terms of calculating the days, others can also match, and our own hotel is indeed a long-term partner of Wanyu Film, because it is said that the relationship between our own owner and the senior executives of the film industry is very strong. Wanyu Cinema spends tens of millions of yuan every year at this hotel, and all of this is just right. However, for Jiang at that time, it meant nothing and he couldn't go back to the past. But now, Jiang has returned to the past, but he still doesn't know if Xiaobo will be waiting for him there. Mr. Zheng, our movie is really almost ready. We have all ordered 6 sets of exoskeleton battle suits from Vita Studios in New Zealand, and they can be filmed as soon as they arrive. If you withdraw your investment now, wouldn't it take our lives? In an elegant and luxurious private room, a table was filled with dishes, and a somewhat humble man was praying to another man. Guo, it's not that we don't want to invest in your project Wandering Waterball. We were also passionate about this project back then. I've agreed with you that it will be released during the Spring Festival season in 2017, but it's almost 2018 now. You still have half of the plot left to film, and the post-production has only just begun. When can we wait for the movie to be released? Also, although I don't know how you convinced the incoming CEO to invest in your movie, in my opinion, the current film market in China is not mature enough, and the audience has become accustomed to accepting super science fiction films from Hollywood. When the audience hears that it is a science fiction film produced in our country, they instinctively won't be interested in watching it. Your movie has no market because we can't produce super science fiction films like Hollywood. Mr. Zheng, it's not like that. China's science fiction movies have indeed had a very difficult start, but there must be someone who takes the first step. We have taken the first step today, and in the future, China's science fiction movies will become better and better. This is investing in the future. Guo said. But the first one is often the one who dies the fastest. Mr. Zheng said, Director Guo, you also need to understand me. I have just started to be responsible for the work of Wanyu Film, and I cannot give the first answer sheet to the board of directors as a loss-making deal. The little ball in this world is called the Wandering Water Ball. As the waiter came to serve, Jiang quietly entered the private room and listened to the conversation between the two. I exclaimed that I didn't guess wrong when I came here. Although there are many things different about this water polo, the vast majority of them are still the same. I didn't miss out on this investment small breakthrough. No, it should be an opportunity for wandering water polo. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. I invested in this 60 million. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. I invested in this 60 million. Director Guo remained silent. It was reasonable for him to argue that his own films would not lose money at this time, but in fact, Director Guo did not have confidence in himself. After all, no science fiction film in our country has made money so far, or in other words, there have been no truly large-scale special effects investment in science fiction films before that. Director Guo could not make a guarantee with his eyes closed. Seeing Director Guo's lifeless appearance, Zeng couldn't bear to say, well, I can't completely refuse to give you a chance. If you have the ability to invite any man or woman on this list to play the lead role in the movie, then we can continue to consider it. Ah. Director Guo was taken aback for a moment and took the list from Mr. Zeng's hand. He said it was a list for himself to choose from, but in fact, there were only 2 people on this list. There is a male artist named Yang Fan, and another female artist named Zeng Ku. Yang Fan and Director Guo do know that currently, the top male artists and top traffic celebrities in China are men who claim to have a box office of 300 million yuan. As for this Zeng Ku, Director Guo has never heard of it at all, and he doesn't know who it is. Mr. Zeng, our male and female protagonists have been confirmed for a long time, and they were already on set for filming a few months ago. We have already completed half of the relevant shots. At this time, changing the male and female protagonists may be. There's nothing to be afraid of. Since you're doing special effects, of course you know there's a technique called changing heads now. You can directly change the face of the parts that have already been filmed, and let the new male and female lead actors play the parts that haven't been filmed well. Mr. Zeng said. Mr. Zeng, the current male and female leads have been working very hard, filming for 18 hours every day. There was one time, even 3 days and 3 nights, when they didn't close their eyes to shoot the scene of Biyao. For them. This is a kind of training for them, and they will understand in the future that such an experience is nothing but normal in the entertainment industry. These days, which artist has not been snatched a few roles, let alone I heard that the male and female lead you hired together is less than 100,000 yuan, and the female lead is still a high school student. What are you afraid of? Yes. Director Guo became even more helpless. There is another question. I am not quite sure about Zeng Ku's remuneration, but Yang Fan's remuneration basically starts at 120 million yuan and only gives the crew a maximum of 1 month's schedule. The next play will have to be filmed for at least 3.5 months. What about this cost of remuneration? Zeng Ku's remuneration is not that expensive, just give him a few or 3 million yuan. Yang Fan, let me help you find a way to invite him, her to a meal and have a good conversation at the dinner table. Anyway, you don't need to wash your money, so the remuneration can still be reduced to around 60 million yuan. As for the issue of the schedule, she is one of the top international brands, so the schedule naturally cannot be too much for you. You can choose those shots that need to be taken in person, and let the stunt double take the other shots. Then you can change your face. By the way, aren't the original male and female protagonists well filmed? Why don't we just let them finish the remaining shots and change faces together? It's also simpler and more convenient. Mr. Zeng said, while Guo Zhidao froze in place. After a while, he said, Mr. Zeng, the total investment in one new film is only 60 million people. You 2 actors will have to spend nearly 100 million more to come down, so shouldn't I find a way to get another 40 million to pay for the film? Sigh, things can't be seen this way. Yang Fan is the top traffic actor in the country, with a box office of 300 million yuan. His fans will definitely buy tickets to watch the movie as long as they know he has appeared in it. You just earned an extra 300 million yuan at the box office. If this is 300 million yuan, the Cinema and Film Association will take around 200 million yuan, and the distribution company will split another 30 million yuan. Your production team can still keep more than 80 million yuan, more than double the 40 million yuan. After Mr. Zeng finished speaking, before Director Guo could express his opinion, someone beside him suddenly couldn't help but chuckle. "Who is it?" Mr. Zhang's expression suddenly became extremely ugly, his gaze fiercely fixed on a young man dressed as a waiter in the private room. In such high-end private rooms, there are usually 3-5 servers dedicated to serving the guests inside. As long as the guest does not actively drive the waiter away, the waiter usually stays quietly in the private room, waiting for the guest's instructions at any time. "What are you laughing at?" Mr. Zhang squinted his eyes and asked. "No, I think you're really good at math," the waiter said happily, and Mr. Zhang's expression immediately became even worse. "Very good, you young man have great ideas and I hope to see you here again next time." Mr. Zhang finished speaking and stood up directly, then patted Director Guo's shoulder and said, "Director Guo, please consider my suggestion carefully. If there is no reply tomorrow, the company will officially begin to withdraw its investment. You need to return our 60 million. After speaking, Mr. Zhang left directly without looking back. "Xiao He, why don't you hurry up and apologize to Mr. Zhang? Otherwise, the supervisor will definitely not let you go. Mr. Zhang is a major customer of our hotel, and their company spends millions of dollars in our hotel every month. The supervisor will definitely not let you go." Several service staff around quickly said to the young waiter who had just laughed. "It's okay." The young waiter waved his hand indifferently, but in front of the surprised eyes of the other waiters, he took out a brand new set of dishes and sat on the seat where Mr. Zhang had just sat, flipping his things aside and sitting at the dining table to start eating. While eating, he said, "This table of dishes cost a whopping 30,000 yuan, but Mr. Zhang only spent a few dishes in total. Director Guo, you are really at a loss. If you use this 30,000 yuan to make a movie, at least you can also create 1 or 2 more special effects shots. 30,000 can't even make half a special effects shot." Director Guo glanced at the young man eating and drinking and said with a bitter smile, "You have a personality. Not only did you offend Mr. Zhang, but you also dared to eat and drink here. Aren't you afraid of your leaders scolding you?" "I'm not afraid, I've decided to resign. As long as I resign, no leader can even be considered a fart in my eyes. That guy doesn't know anything except for licking shoes for some boss. In my eyes, a dog is much cuter than him." The young man chuckled as he ate. "Let me introduce myself. My name is He Zheng, from the imperial capital. I used to be a 5-star hotel waiter, but now I am an unemployed wanderer." He Zheng extended a hand to Director Guo, who was completely shocked by the young man's demeanor and foolishly extended his hand. 2 hands tightly clenched together. "I invested in your movie," He Zheng said solemnly to Director Guo after finishing a whole lobster. "Isn't it just 60 million? I'll pay for this money." Just as He Zheng felt good about himself and felt like he was completely domineering, pretending to be a big bee who could score very high in online novels, a voice suddenly rang in his ear, "Congratulations to the pacifier for successfully activating the hidden mission. Investing in a wandering water polo movie. Task objective. Within 10 days, hand over 60 million yuan of investment to the wandering water polo crew. Task reward. Full set of production and manufacturing technology filling knowledge for 0.5 nanometer EUA lithography machine. Important reminder. Currently, there are 6 years, 25 days, 8 hours, 54 minutes, and 12 seconds left until humans discover solar helium flash explosions. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Lord has left. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Lord has left. The wandering water ball is actually real. He Zheng sat dumbfounded on the chair, the big crab feet in his hands seemed to be no longer fragrant. He thought he was reborn and transported to this world to enjoy life, with billions of dollars in wealth, but he never imagined that he came to this world to experience wandering water polo. As for the authenticity of this matter, the system has appeared. Can this matter still be fake? Wait. In that case, if I were the male protagonist of a novel, would be experiencing a dog-blood thrilling novel that combines rebirth, time travel, system and apocalypse. Wait. This is Xuanwen. He Jingda's developed brain quickly calmed him down and began to think about more things. First of all, even if the wandering water ball is real, then the important reminder given is also true, and it will be 6 years before humans discover helium flashes. And this is just a discovery, it does not mean that we really want to start the wandering water polo program. If we look at the original novel, it took nearly 200 years for humans to transform from discovering helium flashes to Earth into an environment that normal humans cannot survive in. If it were the plot of a movie, it would take 50 years from the discovery of helium flashes by humans to the ignition of the engine. So if it's the timeline of the original novel, then He Jing doesn't have to worry at all. He can still live a peaceful life until old age. If it's the timeline of the movie, then He Jing can also live to around 70 years old, and his life is worth it. At the same time, He Jing unexpectedly obtained the system artifact. From the current perspective, the system is giving him a reward. Although I don't know exactly what this canned knowledge is, there is no doubt that there should be technology related to lithography machines. Isn't it possible to easily sell him a few $100,000,000? So this sudden emergence of the system is not a bad thing for oneself, on the contrary, it is still a good thing. He was pondering these things, and Guo Fan beside him couldn't help it. Although the young man in front of him may seem unreliable and still speak for 60 million yuan, under normal circumstances, he should turn his head and leave at this time. But he is really short of money now. If it weren't for this 60 million, the whole movie would have completely cracked. So he still spoke with a hint of trust and asked, Mr. He, what you said is true. Are you really willing to invest 60 million for us? Of course. He Jing shook his wits before sobering up from his thoughts. He nodded and said, this is naturally true. Let's add WeChat, and within 10 days, I will bring 60 million to sign a contract with you. Okay. Guo Fan was excited for a moment and immediately added WeChat to He Jing. He left with gratitude, leaving He Jing alone to continue gnawing on the seafood. There's no way, who wants this whole table to have too many dishes, and seafood is the most expensive. Of course, you have to pick up seafood and eat it. Serious, you're really screwed today. I just heard the big boss who used to call us all the time, his tone was very bad, and he said that if we don't solve your problem, he won't come to our place to consume anymore. He was the only old soy milk in this hotel who could be called a close ally. He nervously leaned over and said, I reckon Bald Lu is coming soon. Be mentally prepared, he will torment you for several hours. But you're really too fierce today. What do you really want to do? Didn't you hear that? I just want to invest in movies. He Jing said with a smile. No, you really plan to invest 60 million. Where did you get that much money? Are you crazy? Before old Do Nai could finish speaking, he heard a burst of angry footsteps coming from far to near. That's it, Bald Lu is coming. You're dead. Old Do Milk quickly fled to the side, while He Jing continued to gnaw on the legs of the great emperor crab in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, just as He Jing finished gnawing on 2 imperial crabs, one was tall and fat, with a Mediterranean on his head. A man in a suit rushed in and pointed directly at He Jing's nose, saying, What's your surname? ##Yuan. After a period of words that even the starting point refused to write, the Bald Lu finally spoke in human language. You should immediately go find Mr. Zheng to apologize, kneel in front of him to apologize, and pray for forgiveness. If you don't get his forgiveness, you won't come back for a lifetime. Okay. He Jing nodded after listening, continuing to nibble on the emperor crab while saying, Okay, I promise to meet your requirements. You're quite sensible. I'll arrange a car to take you to find Mr. Zheng. No, Lao Lu, I think you made a mistake. What I mean is, to fulfill your wish that I will never come back in this lifetime. He Zheng said seriously after gnawing on the last emperor crab leg. You. Director Liu was so angry that he trembled all over. Don't point your fingers at me. He Zheng put down Director Liu's hand and grabbed his hand, saying, Old Liu, you always like to point at others. This is not good. D has educated us that the people are all equal, regardless of high or low. Although you used to be my leader, this is only a matter of position, and we are both equal in personality. You can't show your superiority by pointing your finger at me like this, you can only show that you are not cultured. As for apologizing to someone surnamed Zheng, it's impossible because I didn't do anything wrong. He didn't learn math well himself, so he gave it all back to his math teacher. I kindly reminded him that there was a problem, but he didn't want to accept it. Instead, he threw a tantrum at me, who took the initiative to help him find the wrong person. Is this reasonable? Some people like to blame others for their mistakes because they don't have any other skills. They also like to have a dog's eye and look down on others, thinking that I am a little waiter, so they can easily vent their anger on me. But his ideas and thinking are wrong. Great leaders have educated us that whether it's waiters or business executives, they are all screws in society with their own huge value. We cannot distinguish high and low based on different professions. This is feudal thinking, it's unacceptable. No matter what clothes one wears, people are essentially human and will not change because of what clothes they wear. We respect them, and they should also respect us. Alright, I don't think this kind of person has much future. It may not be long before they are driven away by the owner of Wanyu Film. However, this is also someone else's business and has nothing to do with me. I won't talk too much. Anyway, I'm right, it's him who's at fault. He should have thanked me proactively, but since I have a lot, I won't argue with people like him. Old Liu, in order not to make it difficult for you, Grandpa left today. Anyway, I didn't plan to ask the company for this month's salary, so I won't write my resignation report. We used to be colleagues, but now we'll be friends. I know you may not consider me a friend, and many of the things you do at work are very foolish. Apart from yelling and forcing us to work overtime there, you basically won't do anything. But I still regard you as my friend because it's not easy for you to rely on your uncle's relationship to sit in this position, causing the other managers to be very hostile to you. They put on small shoes for you, making him look embarrassing. So, there should be a reason why you are so irritable. Forget it, let's not say much. Talking too much can hurt our feelings. Let's continue to work hard here in the future. If you can't come to me, I don't have any other money, but I still have money to treat you to barbecue. He Zheng held the hand of this old Liu for a moment and said goodbye sincerely, then walked away without looking back. The manager Liu himself was stunned for a long time, as if he hadn't figured out who the person he was talking to just now was. Is this what a waiter should say? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. 3 Great Regrets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 3 Great Regrets. Great. It's great. He Zheng has never been so happy in his life. In his previous life, He Zheng actually lived quite miserably. He was always afraid of things and cautious, but eventually lived to be in his 60s with nothing left. He lived alone in an old house, without even any descendants. It was simply not too tragic. Every time He Zheng recalls his life, he feels regretful. So in the last few years of life, I made a table for myself, which detailed over 100 things that I regretted the most. The top-ranked one among them is regretting that they have lived cautiously in their lifetime, but as a result, they did not achieve the desired peaceful life. On the contrary, everyone around them can bully them and feel frustrated throughout their lives. So in this life, He Zheng has made up his mind to live a carefree and unrestrained life, and no one can ever feel nauseous about himself. He Zheng only guarantees that he will not harm anyone else, and does not care about anything else. Of course, to live like this, one must have a strong economic foundation. After all, only with money can one live so carefree. Without money, one can only be as cautious as in the previous life. Speaking of which, it is the second regret in He Zheng's life that he did not sell his own house. In his previous life, He Zheng's bank card never exceeded 200,000 yuan, but many people around him said He Zheng was a billionaire. This is not teasing He Zheng, but He Zheng really has billions of assets, which is a courtyard house left by his parents, and it is also a courtyard house located on the Third Ring Road. When you hear these three words, many people probably already know why He Zheng is a billionaire. After 2015 on Earth, the quadrangles in the Third Ring Road of Yanjing are basically worth more than 1 billion yuan, and they are still the kind that money cannot buy because many people do not even know how to sell them. After his parents passed away, he actually considered selling this courtyard house. But thinking that this was passed down from my grandparents to my father, and then from my father to myself, with only 100-year-old ancestral property, selling it like this seems to be a great disrespect to my ancestors, and the neighbors around me will also chew their tongues. And the most crucial point is, who knows how much the housing prices of this courtyard house will rise in the future. He Zheng remembers that around 90 years ago, a neighbor sold their courtyard house for about 1.8 million yuan, becoming a millionaire and then going abroad to become a successful person. By 2015, the price of his courtyard house had exceeded 130 million yuan, and the 1.8 million yuan he had received back then had already been spent completely. Returning to my home country is shameless. It is said that I am still flipping through the trash cans every day in another country, which is unbearable. And this neighbor naturally became a daily joke in the mouths of other neighbors. Almost every time they heard news that someone wanted to sell a quadrangle courtyard, this neighbor would be used as a model to humiliate them. Over time, He Zheng also felt that quadrangle courtyards would continue to rise in the future, and at this time, who would sell SB? In 2021, news came that the area where this courtyard house was located had been designated as a historical and ancient architectural protection zone. All the quadrangle courtyards in the area have become cultural relics protection units, and residents can still live inside the quadrangle courtyards. However, unless they can obtain permission from relevant departments, no decoration or renovation of the quadrangle courtyards is allowed, and it is necessary to ensure the ancient color and fragrance of these buildings. Of course, it is even more impossible to trade quadrangle houses, and the Housing Management Bureau has directly suspended the transfer procedures for quadrangle houses. You can do it privately if you want, but you can't handle any property certificate transfer procedures anyway. Legally, this courtyard will always belong to the original owner. Who else would dare to buy such a yard like this? So, the neighbors stopped talking about the quadrangle, and He Zheng could only live his whole life in this old house passed down from his ancestors. The fixed assets of this billionaire are really firmly fixed. This has left He Zheng in regret for the rest of his life. If he had sold this courtyard house and held on to billions of assets, how could he not even find a wife? So this matter became the second regret of He Zheng. Now, He Zheng plans to take care of this second regret, which is to sell this courtyard house as quickly as possible. With the issuance of relevant orders such as the future of the province, the courtyard house in his hands will never be sold again. This is also why He Zheng dared to invest 60 million when he spoke up, because he really has 60 million. As for investing in wandering water polo, it is definitely a profitable business. According to He Zheng's memory, the first installment of Wandering Water Polo grossed around 4.7 billion yuan at the box office in his previous life, while Wu Lang, who also invested 60 million yuan, earned nearly 300 million yuan in revenue, a five-fold increase. Apart from investing in the stock market and speculating in BT coins, there is no business in the world that is more profitable than this. So when He Zheng sorted out his memory, the first thing he did was to seize the opportunity to invest in stray water polo by taking advantage of the proximity of the water tower to the moon. Once you have 300 million, wouldn't you be able to lie down and live a beautiful life, free and unrestrained, as imagined in your previous life? With such beautiful fantasies, He Zheng walked step by step to the entrance of his own alley. The closest house to the entrance was He Zheng's neighbor, who was the second closest to his home. At this moment, He Zheng's house was still lit, and a woman could still be heard humming a song. It seems like I need to deal with it now, the third thing I regret in my life. He Zheng suddenly thought of something and stood still, with more and more anger accumulating on his face. The third thing He Zheng regrets in his life is his ex-girlfriend, a kind-hearted father who supported him all the way from the mountainous area. Now he is still his girlfriend, and he loves her to the bone at this time. But just a month later, I realized that I was actually the greenest green turtle in the world. I had been with my girlfriend for 4 years, and for 3 years, I was actually the mistress of another man. And she was about to find a chance to become a full-time employee. So 1 month later, my girlfriend will kick me away. What's even more outrageous is that before kicking herself away, she even fooled herself into giving her a loan to buy a car, claiming it was for marriage, and the result is predictable. It is precisely because of this that He Zheng was devastated by women. He dared not find a girlfriend for more than a decade, but when He Zheng wanted to, he was old and poor, and could no longer find a girlfriend. He Billion, it's over between us. Get out of here. He Zheng thought of these and felt extremely angry. He rushed into his courtyard and found that water was coming from the bathroom. He guessed that He Billion was probably taking a shower, so he kicked open the bathroom door and planned to humiliate this woman while she was taking a shower to seek revenge. As a result, He Zheng saw a face and body that was not unfamiliar, but extremely beautiful and stunning. Brother-in-law. In the bathroom, a young girl tightly hugged a towel and looked at He Zheng rushing in with great fear. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Bichi and Biyao. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 5 Bichi and Biyao, cough cough, I'm very sorry. I thought it was your sister who was taking a shower inside. I swear to the heavens here that I never saw anything I shouldn't have seen. When the girl dressed and appeared in front of He Zheng said with a serious expression. Yes, brother-in-law, you don't need to apologize. I believe you haven't seen anything, brother-in-law. The girl's innocent expression actually made He Zheng feel a bit embarrassed. By the way, why did you come? I remember your sister said, you're still in your 3rd year of high school, so why did you suddenly come to Yanjing? He Zheng brought a cup of hot tea to the little girl and asked curiously. The college entrance examination has been completed, and I feel like I did pretty well. My sister said she wanted me to come to Yanjing to play, so I took the train over. The little girl kept lowering her head, nervously playing with the teacup inside her hand. Then let your sister take you to play well. He Zheng Dao. What about brother-in-law? The little girl asked with some anticipation. I don't have time. He Zheng said very bluntly, and then the whole room fell into a strange silence. Just as He Zheng was feeling embarrassed all over, the little girl suddenly asked, brother-in-law, what's wrong with you and sister? How do you know? When you kicked the door just now, it seemed that you were very angry with my sister and said you had finished playing with her. The little girl said here, hesitating for a moment, and I feel that seeing my sister this time is indeed a bit different. Since my older sister started college, her first year has been better, and every year she comes back to dress much better than the year before. She also loves to show off the various bags and clothes she wears. It seems like a set of clothes on her body costs tens of thousands of yuan, and a bag even costs hundreds of thousands of yuan, which makes me all dumbfounded. Moreover, my older sister used to stay at home for about 10 days during the Chinese New Year, at least finishing the entire Spring Festival holiday. However, starting from the previous year, my older sister only stayed at home for about 4 or 5 days at most, and this year's Chinese New Year was even more exaggerated. She only stayed at home for New Year's Eve and left in a hurry on the first day of the Lunar New Year. She even said you urged her to go back, which made my parents very unhappy, said the little girl. There's such a thing. He Zheng's expression twisted even more in an instant. Although decades had passed in his previous life, He Zheng felt that he had forgotten about it. But now when I hear it again, I still feel a piercing pain. He Zheng is not foolish. He hasn't seen He Billion for over 20 days during the Chinese New Year this year, but he only stayed at home for one New Year's Eve before leaving. Where will the remaining 19 days be? Can He Zheng still guess? And the little girl continued, and just now, my sister originally said she would be at home with me until you come back. She also asked me to take a shower, but just as I entered the bathroom, she received a call and hurriedly left, saying she would take care of me when my brother-in-law comes back. Brother-in-law, if you have a quarrel with your sister, will you still care about me? No. He Zheng said very bluntly, and the little girl who spoke immediately blushed and lowered her head. Sigh. He Zheng sighed and then said, since you have seen it, there is no need for me to hide it from you. Your sister has abandoned me and found a better man. She lives in a higher house than me, has more money in the bank than me, and is more than 20 years older than me. She is indeed an excellent match for her. I don't want to burden your sister anymore, so we are destined to break up. We parted ways, and we don't have any brother-in-law or sister-in-law relationship. You still have to follow your sister. But you stay here until your sister comes back, and I can't leave you in this unfamiliar place. Thank you brother-in-law. The little girl quickly said with great gratitude, making him feel a bit embarrassed. Immediately after, the little girl saw the whole room in chaos and without saying a word, picked up various cleaning tools and began to tidy up. There's no need, this house. He Zheng originally wanted the little girl not to work so hard, but seeing the little girl working hard to clean the room, He Zheng couldn't help but recall a long time ago. When another little girl came to her own house for the first time, she was also so diligent in cleaning the house, her eyes couldn't help but stare. Now 7 or 8 years have passed, and that little girl has also been 3 years without doing any housework. In the end, all these tasks were done by He Zheng himself, and He Zheng himself is still doing them tirelessly. He Zheng couldn't help but recall many past events, and this memory went straight to dark. The little girl also finished cleaning up, and then began to arrange for washing vegetables and preparing dinner. Biyao. Suddenly, He Zheng said, and the little girl's body involuntarily jumped down, then excitedly said, brother-in-law, remember my name. Don't call me brother-in-law, we don't have this kind of relationship. He Zheng sighed and said, actually, I forgot your name quite a bit. But suddenly I remembered when I went to your house, you were still a little bit young. I asked you what your name was, and you said you were Bichi. I said no, I had to change your name, so I changed it to Biyao. At that time, it was just a joke. I didn't expect you to still remember that name now. Your real name should still be called Bichi. No, my current name is Biyao, this is my ID card. If you don't believe it, look. Biyao quickly handed over her ID card to He Zheng, who glanced at it and actually changed it to Biyao. Speaking of this matter, I also want to thank my brother-in-law, you. My parents don't have much culture, and my sister's name is He Billion. So, please name me Bichi. They didn't have any malicious intentions originally. Later, when I was in junior high school, I realized what Bichi meant. Thanks to your brother-in-law, you had already reminded me at that time. Otherwise, if I really went to class under the name of Bichi, I wouldn't have imagined what kind of ridicule I would encounter in school. Biyao said, her eyes turning red. It can be imagined that when a girl discovers that her name is actually Bichi, or the first time she knows what Bichi means, her mentality will explode. Wait, you changed your name before middle school. When I went to your house for an exchange, it seemed like you were only in 4th grade. Isn't that saying you changed your name as soon as I left? He Zheng asked in surprise. Well. Biyao nodded and said, after you left, brother-in-law, I begged my father to accompany me to the Public Security Bureau to change my name. I remember I begged for a long time, but my father didn't want to cause such trouble at first. After all, it takes 3 hours to walk from our village to the nearest police station, and there are still many procedures to go through. Neighbors around advised me to call my old name honestly. After all, they don't think there is any problem with the name Bichi. But I kept begging my father, kneeling on the ground begging him, so he had no choice but to force me to change my name. You're going to change your name just because of one of my words? Jiang couldn't help but feel a bit shocked when he heard this. Biyao nodded and whispered, after all, this is the only gift my brother-in-law left for me when he left. I must take good care of it. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Departure and New Sisters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Departure and New Sisters. With a thud, Jiang felt his little heart being hit hard by something, and his nose was even slightly sore. He quickly turned around and after a while, he said, I remember that when the program aired, the part where I changed your name seemed to have turned into me not satisfied with your name and forcing you to change it, forcing you to cry loudly. That's all talk from the production team. Biyao quickly said, I'm not crying because you changed my name. I actually shed tears because I was very happy. At that time, I even said a lot of thank you to my brother-in-law through the microphone. But they cut off all the words I said, leaving only the scene of me crying. I only saw the video of that episode a year later, which made me cry in anger at that time. And there are many other things that they are all editing haphazardly, such as brother-in-law saying something while you were eating. Stop it. Forget it, it's okay. Jiang quickly waved his hand and said, that's just the show effect. I've also studied media for 4 years, and this trick is the skill of media professionals. After all, distorting facts in a variety show is not the original sin. The biggest sin is not having ratings. Brother-in-law, I don't know what the ratings are. I just feel like you've suffered a lot of injustice, but my sister took advantage of it. Your parents are so kind, and my sister is really lucky. But she doesn't know how to cherish it. I don't understand what to cherish. Biyao, you speak ill of me when you come here, it's no use I hurt you so much. A slightly sharp voice said. A few seconds later, a woman dressed in fashion, with exquisite makeup, a pair of hateful heights, a Chanel bag hanging on her arm, and almost everything on her body is branded. An extremely beautiful woman walked in. This woman's appearance is 7 or 8 points similar to Biyao's, but the innocence and naturalness on Biyao's face have disappeared without a trace. What sets her apart is her internet celebrity beauty. Of course, you can also say that she is an urban socialite. Obviously, this is Jiang's current girlfriend and also Biyao's sister, Billion. Jiang, you're too shameless. When my sister arrived, you asked him to clean the house and cook for you. Don't you even know how to invite her to the hotel for a good meal? Seeing the renovated room and half-cooked home-cooked dishes, Billion not only didn't have any good words coming out of her mouth, but also directly criticized Jiang. If it was in the past, Jiang would apologize in fear and immediately take the sisters to the hotel to eat. But at this moment, Jiang clearly couldn't have done it. He looked at Billion contemptuously and said, when you first came to my house, weren't you also proactive in cleaning the house, doing laundry, and cooking? You even told the camera that people should know how to be grateful. Now it seems that at least Biyao still remembers these things, but you have completely forgotten them. Jiang, are you crazy? How dare you talk to me like this? Billion looked at Jiang with a shocked expression. She had never imagined that one day she would hear such words in Jiang's mouth. How could I not dare to speak like this? After someone left, there were 6 phone calls on a Friday, crying and shouting Mom and Dad on the phone, saying they wanted to be their daughter for the rest of their lives, to be with them for the rest of their lives, and to care for them. By the way, I still remember my mom telling me that you even said on the phone that you really liked me, a brother you haven't even met before, and wanted to be my daughter-in-law, making my mom so happy that she couldn't find her, and finally brought you back from that village. Also, I remember you mentioned on the phone that your parents were abusing you in the village because they thought you were a girl, so they wouldn't give you food or study, right? Sister, how could you tell such lies? Mom and Dad are so kind to you, and my brother hasn't bought new clothes for 3 years, yet you have a new one every year. Biyao couldn't help but exclaim excitedly upon hearing this. Zheng. You. Billion was trembling all over with energy at this moment. The experience back then was an eternal pain in Billion's heart, a nightmare she tried her best to forget, but now it was completely torn apart by Zheng without any hesitation. What, tearing open your disguise, tearing open your wounds, making you feel pain, isn't it? Zheng stared fiercely at Billion and said, you feel pain now, have you ever thought about my pain? I've been tormented by you for 40 years. Do you know what kind of life I've been living for these 40 years? You bitch. Zheng, you're crazy. You're only 22 years old, where did you come from for 40 years? Billion shouted loudly. I say there is, and ever since I discovered the truth, I feel like I've been through a long time, like 40 years. He said angrily, still looking for a hole to fill in the gap. What the truth, Zheng? I admit I may have been a bit indifferent to you recently, but I have never done anything wrong to you. Billion said. Billion, you're still so foolish. When did I say you did something wrong to me? Do you need to admit it to yourself? He asked back and forth. Billion was momentarily stunned and could only continue to refuse to admit it. I didn't do anything wrong to you. If you have the ability, you can tell me who I did that with. Luu. Zheng said a name directly, and Billion suddenly froze in place. She looked at Zheng incredulously, obviously unable to believe that this small restaurant waiter, Zheng, had already known the identity of that man, and even exposed his identity directly. I also know that this is just your fourth man, the previous one is named Xinyu, the previous one is named Qianping, and the first one is your homeroom teacher in college, a nearly 60-year-old Jia Zhuang, with oily faces and eyes that can't even stand it. Of course, this is just what I know. There are still a few I don't know, so I really don't know. Zheng rudely pointed out the names of those adulterers. However, these were not investigated by Zheng himself, but were told by Billion herself when she tried to force her to break up. Facing the 4 names reported by Zheng, Billion knew that the other party had a large amount of intelligence in their hands. Although she didn't know how the other party got these things, Billion understood that sophistry was no longer useful. Sister, how could you do such a thing? Apologize to your brother. Law quickly and beg for his forgiveness. You are really sorry for your actions. Biyao beside her couldn't help but angrily said to her sister when she heard this. You shut up. Billion glared at her younger sister and then said to Zheng Dao, okay, since that's the case, let's all talk about it. Do you think I'm happy at your house? Do you think I really want to be your girlfriend? If it weren't for your mother saying on the show that if I were her daughter. Law, she might be willing to let me stay forever, how could I be with someone like you who has no ambition, no ability, and nothing but self-righteous good people? You are also a graduate of BJ Film Academy, but now you are working as a waiter for a hotel. Aren't you from Media Academy? You are going to be a media person, you are going to invest in filming or some TV program. If you could invest in a movie of all sizes and let me play the female lead, would I go and accompany those men for an opportunity to act? Zheng, I am different from you. I am an ambitious woman. I have told you before that Fan Yi is my goal and dream. Whoever is blocking my way forward, I will kick it away without hesitation, even you are no exception. Billion said loudly, attracting all the neighbors around her in a loud voice. She gathered at the door, discussing something seriously. Seeing so many familiar neighbors, Billion also understood that she couldn't stay here any longer. She grabbed Biyao and said, anyway, today we'll cut ties and never owe each other again. Let's go, Biyao. Today, my sister will take you to a 5-star hotel where your brother-in-law works as a waiter. He Billion said, pulling away the reluctant Biyao. Zhengzi remained silent throughout the process, just watching the two people leave coldly. Then he came up to ask for warmth and comfort, while also asking the neighbors who were gossiping about what had happened. Zheng didn't hide anything and directly told the story. Based on his understanding, even if he didn't say it himself, these authentic Yanjing people could figure out the entire situation on their own. Instead of letting them come up with all sorts of outrageous news, it's better to just explain things clearly on their own. After being satisfied with gossip, the neighbors angrily scolded the adulterous and promiscuous woman while touching their stomachs and leaving. When it was completely dark, Zheng thought that he had not eaten any food and decided to go out and find a roadside stall to have a barbecue. Unexpectedly, just as I left the alley, I saw a somewhat thin young girl curled up at a corner, avoiding the cold night breeze of June in Yanjing. Biyao, why are you still here? Didn't your sister take you to stay in a 5-star hotel? Zheng asked in surprise when he saw Biyao. I won't go. Biyao shook her head and said, I don't know where my sister got the money to stay in a 5-star hotel, but the money must be sour and smelly. I want to persuade my sister to change her ways and at least apologize to her brother. In-law, but she refused. I had a big argument with her and she didn't care about me. This city is too unfamiliar to me, and I don't know where to go, so I walked back. But I don't know how to face you, so I can only squat here and think of a way. What can you think of squatting here? Zheng sighed and then picked up Biyao's little hand, just like the little hand he used to hold up Billion, saying, let's go, brother, take you to barbecue. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Selling a House. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Selling a house. Having nothing to say overnight, Zheng arranged for Biyao to stay at home the next day, or go for a walk on his own, while he himself rushed to the real estate agency, preparing to sell the house. Although Zheng knows that finding an agent to sell a house can be a scam and requires a considerable intermediary fee, the problem is that if he wants to sell a quadrangle within 10 days, only an agent can do it. Zheng went straight to Ijia Real Estate, which is the largest chain real estate agency in the country and has the most customers, making it the easiest to find buyers. When Zheng arrived at the agency, there was no dog blood plot in the novel or any staff member who ignored him. At this time, it is the off-season for housing sales, and almost all the employees in the intermediary company are sitting there bored waiting for customers. Therefore, when Zheng appeared, an employee immediately came up to speak attentively. I want to sell a house. Zheng expressed his purpose very bluntly. Don't worry, in Yanjing, our love home sells hundreds of units every day, and we guarantee to sell your house at the highest price. The staff member immediately said, but ironically, the next moment he said, just as you know, the housing market is not very prosperous recently, and many bosses will sell at a reasonable price, so it depends on your needs. If you are in a hurry, you need appropriate. I'm in a hurry. Zheng said bluntly, my request is very simple, that is to help me sell the house within 5 days, and the full payment must be received. Well, the staff beside me listened for a moment before reluctantly saying, Sir, although I understand your anxious mood now, selling a house is a matter that cannot be done quickly. It requires meeting the right customer at the right time. Moreover, customers are also very picky, and many customers will keep looking at it for several months. Another thing is the process of handling the procedures. The fastest time it takes to complete the entire set of procedures is 3 days, which means you only leave us 2 days to communicate with the client. This is really difficult. Perhaps you can relax the time to about a month. How many points do you take a loan? Zheng suddenly asked. For this type of house, the number of points is usually between 0.5 and 2 points. Different types of houses and prices vary. If you are in a regular residential area, we usually charge around 2 points. If you are a standalone villa, we usually charge around 1 point, said the staff. Hey, didn't you just say there's still 0.5 points left? What type of room is this? Jiang asked curiously. That's from a courtyard house. Although the staff cursed in their hearts that he was just a stingy person, they definitely couldn't bear to pay 0.5 points and wanted to keep the agency fee to the lowest level. He was also very satisfied because it was his turn to pretend to be forced next. So as a staff member, I continued with a smile, "Sir, the 0.5 point is a special policy we have introduced for special unit types like quadrangle houses. Because the average price of quadrangle houses is almost 100 million yuan or more, and the intermediary fee for 1 point is about 1 million yuan. We also feel a bit dissatisfied with the high intermediary fee, so we can reduce the intermediary fee to 0.5 point through special policies. If you have a courtyard house for sale, sir, then I can only give you 0.5 points. Otherwise, we cannot give you 0.5 points. This is a special policy for courtyard houses, and what you want to sell must be a courtyard house," the staff said. In fact, many people used to propose a policy of 0.5 points, but usually when they say this to customers and say that you need to have a courtyard house to sell, even the most arrogant customers will bow their heads at this time, just smile and stop talking. Then he heard Jiang exclaim in surprise, "Great, what I want to sell is a courtyard house, perfectly in line with your special policy." Ahem. The staff suddenly coughed several times, while the other staff members around who were watching the excitement also stood up in shock. The store manager, who had been chatting behind the computer, hurried over and excitedly asked, "Sir, do you really want to sell a courtyard house?" "Of course, my time is precious and I don't have time to waste with you here." Jiang Dao. "Okay, of course we know your time is precious, but the quadrangle project needs to be carefully considered. Could you please show us the relevant documents?" "We don't need the original, just have a copy for us to confirm," said the store manager. "It's okay, I've brought you all the original documents. If there's anything missing, I'll go get it." After saying that, Jiang opened a small briefcase in his hand and placed all the documents related to the courtyard on the table one by one. All the staff in the entire store couldn't help but gather together, their eyes wide open, and look at the documents placed on the table. Although it may seem like some ordinary paper, it is actually worth billions of yuan. Brothers, thank you to the boss for giving us more insights. But in our industry, 90% of people have never personally built a courtyard house, which has become an obsession for many elderly people in the industry. Before retirement, they want to sell a courtyard house themselves, even if it's not profitable. "We never expected this opportunity to happen now," said the store manager excitedly. There may be some flattery involved, but it cannot be denied that Jiang was being flattered very comfortably, so he said, "I urgently need money, so as long as you can help me sell the house within 5 days, even if it's a little cheaper, it doesn't matter." "Understood, boss, rest assured that we will make at least 500,000 yuan from this order. In order to make this 500,000 yuan, I will definitely sell it to you. I will find customers for you now." In fact, many bosses also want to buy a courtyard house and have placed orders with us, but it is difficult to find a company willing to sell it. After all, there are several quadrangle courtyards in Yanjing now, 1 carat and 1 pit, and the number of quadrangle courtyards will only decrease, not increase. The market demand is still strong. The store manager told Jiang Dao as he began to enter the computer, search for back-end data, and then directly started making phone calls. "Hello Mr. Wang, I am Xiaozheng, the customer service manager of Biyao. It's like this. We currently have a house for sale in a courtyard house. You have registered with us to purchase a courtyard house, so we will contact you to see if you have. Would you be willing to let us wait for you for a month? I'm very sorry about this. The seller is currently in urgent need of money and his requirement is to complete the transaction within 5 days. If you don't have time yourself, would that be?" The phone hung up. "Hello Mr. Zhu. The store manager made more than a dozen phone calls in one go, but the results were almost the same. No one could complete the transaction in just 5 days. After all, this is not an ordinary house transaction, but a quadrangle courtyard with a selling price of over 100 million yuan. Completing the transaction within 5 days means that the buyer needs to have over 100 million yuan in cash on hand. Having cash worth over 100 million yuan on hand is a difficult task for many bosses with a net worth over 10 billion yuan, let alone buying a house. Naturally, it is impossible to agree to such an outrageous time requirement. During this period, the store manager also came to negotiate with Zheng to see if the schedule could be appropriately relaxed. But Zheng refused them all directly. Can he relax the time? Will the system wait for him? So Zheng bit his teeth tightly and never relaxed. Helplessly, the store manager could only contact them one by one, but none of them were successful. Watching the morning pass by, the seller still couldn't find it. Helpless, the store manager could only dial the phone of some colleagues. These peers are not from Ijia, but from other intermediary companies. When Ijia's own user reserves cannot be met, the store manager can only ask other companies for user information that they are willing to purchase. Some people may find this somewhat unbelievable. How could a company be willing to actively open up its own customer information to its peers? Shouldn't peers be fierce competitors? This statement is wrong. Sometimes peers are opponents, but sometimes they are also peers. It is very normal to obtain user information from opponents and achieve a win-win situation when our own resources are insufficient. After all, as long as this transaction is successful, the company that provides user information can also receive a 40% intermediary share, which is beneficial for everyone. The most important thing is to succeed in business and earn money. However, when Ijia began to contact colleagues, the situation did not seem to change. Each colleague expressed their frustration. Although there were many bosses willing to buy a courtyard house, could they extend the transaction time to more than a month? 5 days is too tight, and no boss can complete the transaction within 5 days. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Transaction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Transaction. He arrived at this beloved home at 9 o'clock in the morning, and now it's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, still unable to find a suitable partner. The staff around him kept persuading Zheng to relax the time limit, otherwise it would be impossible to trade anything. Then Zheng directly stated that his father now needs millions of dollars for treatment, and delaying the day could make it difficult for these people to talk. However, Zheng himself did feel a bit overwhelmed and couldn't keep dragging on finding a buyer. Therefore, he decided to give it a little more time to check, and if it didn't work out, he would lower the price a bit. Anyway, he had to sell the house within the specified time. Oh, I never thought selling a house could be so torturous. If only my parents had left me with a building instead of a courtyard house, how could it be so troublesome to sell it? Zheng sighed, and the staff next to him wanted to curse, but their faces still had to be covered in smiles. Just as Zheng was about to give up, he suddenly heard the store manager's excited voice say, "Is that so? Are there any customers willing to take over?" Okay, I understand." A few minutes later, the store manager excitedly approached Zheng Dao and said, "Mr. He, we have just found a customer who is willing to buy your courtyard house, and she is also willing to complete the procedures within 5 days. However, she has one thing, which is that she hopes you can also move out within 5 days without dragging mud or water." "No problem, what about the price? Has she lowered the price?" Zheng asked curiously. The price he negotiated with the agent was 120 million yuan, which is already about 10 million yuan cheaper than the same courtyard houses in the surrounding area. This is also why Zheng has the confidence to shout out that trading must be done within 5 days, after all, it can save 10 million. Not at all. "This customer seems to be very eager to move in as soon as possible," said the store manager. "And he is currently rushing over here, preparing to go and see the house with us. As long as the house is in good condition, we can sign the contract today and start the transfer process directly. No problem, I'll do my best to cooperate. He Zheng immediately said, and then sat in the store waiting all the time. As a result, the store was about to close at around 8 p.m., and He Zheng was about to curse when the other party arrived late. I'm very sorry, there were so many things that I finally came out. The woman who came in was wrapped in a layer of black all over her body, wearing a big black coat, black sunglasses, and a mask. Even her hat was black, with an extremely mysterious appearance. Miss Wen, it's okay. We should have waited. It's Mr. He who hasn't even eaten his meal, but has been waiting for you here all along. He is really sincere, the store manager said with a smile. Well, if I am satisfied with the house tonight and Mr. He is indeed able to move cleanly within 5 days, then I will cover Mr. He's agency fee. As a personal apology, how about that? The buyer's words were accompanied by the staff around them, who were all amazed by his boldness. You should know that the intermediary fee for this one party is as high as around 600,000 yuan. That is to say, this woman gave 600,000 yuan as a gesture of apology as soon as she spoke up. How audacious this is. That's really great. As long as we can negotiate, I'll just move out early tomorrow morning, and I'll make a profit from the agency fee. He immediately hit the snake with his stick, jokingly saying, don't give me a 60 yuan gift for nothing. Get in the car, take me to see the house. The woman in black said very decisively, and at the same time, she walked out of the agency. Just as she was about to drive away in her very conspicuous Maserati, He Fong reminded her behind her, Miss, it's better for us to take a taxi. You let me take a taxi. The woman in black looked at He Fong in shock, as if it was a great humiliation for her. Cough cough, I don't have any other meaning. I just want to say that there are no parking spaces in the alley, and there are also no parking spaces on both sides of the road outside the alley. I haven't had a neighbor buy a car voluntarily, just because they bought a car, there's no place to park. If you don't want your baby's car to be scratched or rubbed against by anything, it's better to take another car and follow along, it's more convenient. The woman remained silent for a moment before saying, I can't stand the smell in the taxi. I don't do taxis. Okay, let's take our Xiaowen's car. She's a girl and also drives a Mercedes-Benz. There's aromatherapy in the car, and the smell is very pleasant. The store manager hurriedly said, let her drive 2 people over and then pick them up. What do you think? Sure. The beautiful woman finally let go, and Xiaowen, the beautiful woman in the store, immediately drove her car over. She was usually the gold medal sales expert in the store, and no one looked up to her arrogantly. It was impossible to ride in her car. Apart from the owner and manager, no one else in the store had ever taken her car. But at this moment, one in front of her was a billionaire, and the other was about to become a billionaire. This little beauty naturally had nothing to be proud of. She respectfully invited the two and the store manager to get in the car, and then escorted them to He Zheng's doorstep, where they were kindly escorted out. Then, she found a place to park and waited quietly for their next call. Brother He, you're finally back. I've cooked a few dishes for you. Seeing He Zheng coming back, Biyao walked out happily and then saw the black-clad beauty and the store manager following behind her. She immediately shrank nervously to He Zheng's side. I don't like the smell of oil fumes. The beautiful woman said rudely. He Zheng smiled and didn't speak, while the store manager immediately began to introduce himself enthusiastically. This reflects the professional ethics of a store manager. Although this is the first time he has seen this courtyard house, he can immediately explain the characteristics, advantages, housing habits, and even feng shui of this courtyard house clearly. I couldn't help but nod at the mention of this beautiful woman in black, and at the same time, because the He Zheng family takes great care of this courtyard and has been very diligent in taking care of it. Although this quadrangle has a history of over 100 years, it doesn't seem to have any dirty or messy feeling. Instead, it is covered with various green plants everywhere. The courtyard has also been carefully decorated, and the walls of the room are as white as new, making this beautiful woman very satisfied with her appearance. Finally, she said to Dao, 120 million plus moving out within 5 days. If you can agree, let's sign a contract. No problem. Jing nodded quickly, struggling to suppress his heartbeat. After 5 days, he would become a billionaire. Both Mr. Huang and Mr. Jia have to work hard for several months to become billionaires, but they only took 5 days to become billionaires themselves. Who can match this speed? The next few people went straight back to the store. Although the intermediary company provided a very comprehensive transfer contract in terms of law, the beautiful woman still called her lawyer friend to come over and review the entire contract before officially signing it. Then it was up to the intermediary company, who would be responsible for completing the transfer procedures of the entire house within 5 days, so there was no need to worry about these matters. Brother you really sold the house? Biyao asked incredulously when Jing returned home. Not bad. Jing nodded and finally glanced at his own house, saying, cherish your last night here. We're moving out tomorrow. Then I'm homeless again. Biyao nervously pinched her skirt. You. Jing originally wanted Biyao to go find her sister, but thinking of the little girl talking to him yesterday and knowing the personality of Billion, he was afraid that she was also not comfortable. So he could only say, let's stay in a hotel tomorrow, and then I will find a house to rent. If you are willing to help me open up a house, I can also let you continue living. Thank you, brother Biyao said excitedly, and suddenly hugged Jing. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Lying down earns millions annually. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Lying down earns millions annually. Is this the last day? Jing couldn't help but feel a sense of emotion as he looked at the familiar and unfamiliar environment around him. After all, this is the place where he grew up, and he spent a full 80 years here. 60 years in the previous life and 20 years in this life, don't they add up to 80 years? Now I think that this courtyard will have nothing to do with me anymore, it belongs to someone else. If there is no sadness in Jing's heart, it must be a lie. After all, this room carries too many memories of Jing. But Jing did not regret it. He understood that he had embarked on a brand new path and that he would definitely have better development in the future. Unconsciously, Jing slowly fell asleep, not knowing how long he had slept. Suddenly, Jing felt something unusual, and then slowly opened his eyes, only to find a delicate face staring blankly at him, as if there were some flowers on his face. By the faint morning light outside the window, this face even shone with some radiance. Bai Lian. Jing muttered in a daze, his beautiful face emitting radiance instantly darkened, and then quietly left, while Jing, who was half asleep and half awake, fell asleep again. If this is a dog blood novel, then Jing, who woke up the next day, would probably forget about it. However, it was obvious that Jing did not. After he truly woke up, he still remembered the scene and understood that the one watching him by his bed could not be his ex-girlfriend Billion. The only answer was Biyao, who was busy in the kitchen now. Is it true that Biyao really likes me? Jing is not the male lead in RB's light novels, who only knows about a sexy and can never tell that the girl likes him. Moreover, Biyao has started directly outputting on her face again. No matter how foolish Jing is, he should understand Biyao's intentions. Just Jing was puzzled in his heart, that is, Biyao had no reason to like herself. I have never seen Biyao again except when I went to her house as a child and stayed with her for half a month. Although Jing almost visits the distant home of Biyao once a year, when he goes, Biyao either stays at school to study or works outside to save up tuition fees. Surprisingly, Jing has never met Biyao in person. So for Biyao's liking for herself, Jing felt very surprised. After all, this plot is similar to writing a novel. Perhaps Biyao is interested in my billionaire wealth. Hijing couldn't help but ponder. If that's the case, it's completely understandable. After all, Biyao witnessed Hijing's transformation from an ordinary person to a billionaire with her own eyes. Of course, there is also something that doesn't make sense, which is that when he was falling out with Biyao stood on Hijing's side for the whole time. Later, she even had a falling out with his sister and squatted at the entrance of the alley waiting for Hijing to come over. At this time, Hijing definitely didn't show any intention of selling a courtyard house. Perhaps she really likes me. Hijing muttered, feeling a hint of joy and pride in his heart. After all, in terms of beauty, although there is still a lot of gap between the current Biyao and the billion who has been immersed in the city for nearly 10 years. But these are all makeup and matching issues, just find a designer to come over and instantly make Biyao look completely different. Not to mention Billion's plain face and Hijing's appearance are simply not too familiar. From a simple perspective of her natural appearance, Biyao is much more tender and delicious than Billion. By the way, how was Biyao in her previous life? If she had really liked me a long time ago, then she should have liked me in her previous life too. Hijing tried hard to recall the information about Biyao in his previous life, which reminded him of many things. Compared to how Biyao did come to play in the imperial capital a month before the breakup, but Hijing only saw Biyao once, because Billion accompanied Biyao to play in the imperial capital for 3 days before sending him back directly. Except for the first day when the three of them had dinner together, the following 2 days were spent playing outside with the sister who accompanied her throughout the entire journey, and she did not live in the courtyard of the He family. Later, Hijing never received any news related to Biyao at all. After all, Billion proposed to split up, and Hijing completely cut off all contact with the other He family, so it was impossible to know about Billion's situation. Forget it, let's go with the flow. Hijing set aside these thoughts and began to busy his day's work. There was actually quite a lot of work on this day, not just selling houses, but moving houses. Since he promised to move, it was impossible for Hijing to stay at home and not leave. At this point, there is a problem here, which is that there are many miscellaneous things in Hijing's house. After all, Hijing has lived here for hundreds of years, and there are too many things piled up in it, many of which are even over 100 years old, indicating that there may be antiques and so on. Therefore, if Hijing moves, he naturally needs to move these things away. In this way, a large house is needed to accommodate these things. In theory, it would be more cost-effective for Hijing to rent an apartment at this time, but the problem is that Hijing is used to living in a house on the first floor and is no longer willing to live in a building. After thinking about it, it seems that only a villa can meet his needs. So, Hijing simply dialed the phone number of the store manager from yesterday and asked him to help find a villa for him. The location doesn't matter, but it must have been fully decorated and can be checked in at the same time. The store manager also knew that the other party requested Hijing to move out immediately within 5 days, so he agreed on the spot. He also said that he had dozens of housing options for Hijing to choose from, and it didn't matter if Hijing didn't have the money to pay the deposit. The store could help him advance the payment first, anyway. All the fund transfers would have to be completed by the intermediary company, so he didn't have to worry about Hijing not paying. Hijing was naturally delighted and agreed. After the store manager hung up the phone, yesterday the Xiaowen smiled and said, "This surname he is really interesting. He has a good courtyard and if he doesn't stay, he will go live in a villa." Others are all pursuing accommodation upgrades, but he directly pursues accommodation downgrades. What a fool. Do you think living in a courtyard house would be more comfortable than a modern villa? The store manager asked directly upon hearing Xiaowen's words. Xiaowen's words got stuck in her throat. I am very familiar with courtyard houses. Living in such a place is not even comfortable, and besides sounding more prestigious, the living conditions in a courtyard house are not even as good as an ordinary apartment. And apart from anything else, the villa's area is several times larger than his original courtyard house. Now Mr. He is about to hold billions of yuan, and the villa he rented is only 15 million yuan in full. The house he lives in is more comfortable than before, with a larger area and modern property services. At the same time, he has tens of millions of funds in his hands. Do you know what kind of immortal day this is? Let's put it this way. If Mr. He deposits 50 million renminbi into the bank will directly provide treatment to major clients, which is very simple. He can earn 2% annual fixed interest. In this way, 50 million yuan per year is equivalent to 1 million yuan in interest, which is equivalent to a monthly income of 80,000 yuan, more than twice your monthly income. If you encounter friends' help, the bank can even offer 8% annual fixed interest, which can earn 4 million yuan in interest per year, equivalent to a monthly income of 320,000 yuan, which is 8 times your monthly income. You have been working hard for a year now, giving everything you can imagine, but the result is not as good as 1/8 of what others earn lying down. Do you think Mr. He is a fool, or are you foolish yourself? The manager's words made Xiaowen's face change for a while, but soon she thought of something and excitedly said, "Manager, let me handle this order today. I'll take Mr. He to see the house." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. From Courtyards to Villas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. From Courtyards to Villas, Mr. He, this is the best villa we can find within the 5th Ring Road, and the decoration style is also according to your requirements. When we left, the decoration style of the Ming and Qing dynasties was the same. There are not many villas available for rent in this ready-made style in Yanjing. Xiaowen worked hard to introduce this villa to He Zheng, while keeping her body as close as possible to him. Xiaowen dressed exceptionally beautifully today, not only with exquisite makeup, but also wearing a bag worth less than 200,000 yuan. Lastly, and most importantly, she also wore her invincible ultra-short buttock skirt and flesh silk battle robe, obviously intending to take down our Mr. He Zheng. However, He Zheng doesn't seem to have much interest in this beautiful woman, and his attention is entirely focused on this villa. He is very satisfied with this villa. Although it is a villa located in a modern community, the interior decoration style is in the Ming and Qing dynasties. All the furniture inside is made of solid wood, and it can be seen that all of these furniture are hand-carved, with exceptionally gorgeous workmanship. Staying in such a villa feels like being in a Ming and Qing era, but it also has all kinds of modern equipment, everything that should be there. While the decoration style takes into account the Ming and Qing dynasties, it also allows people living here to experience modern life perfectly. He Zheng is very satisfied with this villa, and of course, the price of this villa is also exceptionally expensive. Under normal circumstances, the annual rent for such a villa in this location is around 300,000 yuan, but the annual rent for this villa has reached 500,000 yuan, naturally due to the interior decoration style and furniture. According to Xiaowen, after purchasing the interior furniture of this villa, complete set would exceed 10 million yuan. If it weren't for the limited opportunities for the homeowner to live here on a daily basis, it would be impossible for them to be willing to rent it out. In fact, this villa has been hung up by an intermediary company for almost a year and has not been rented out. After all, in modern society, there are not many people who can accept this decoration style. And the price, which is more than 200,000 yuan higher than the surrounding villas, also makes many people hesitant. Since I can live in the same villa nearby for 200,000 yuan cheaper, why do I have to live in a villa that looks like an antique? However, He Zheng was very satisfied with this villa. He also liked the style of the Ming and Qing dynasties, so he made a quick decision to rent the villa and directly prepaid 1 year's rent as a deposit. Of course, this deposit needs to be advanced by the intermediary company in advance, and He Zheng himself will definitely not be able to afford so much money. However, when He Zheng was preparing to sign a lease agreement with the owner of this villa, he was informed that the owner was in other places and didn't have time to take care of these small matters, so the entire process was handled by an intermediary company. Anyway, her keys and various documents were also in the intermediary company. Since the employer was unwilling to appear, Jiang naturally didn't mind. He signed a lease agreement with the intermediary company and then began to contact the moving company to move his old antiques one by one into this new villa. Mr. He, actually if the head of the household came in person today, you would have a little surprise. After signing the lease agreement, Xiaowen squinted her eyes and said, leaning half of her body against Jiang's body. A slippery big T-shirt unconsciously pressed against Jiang's thigh. Now it's summer, and Jiang never looks down on formal attire, always wearing shorts. So Jiang's fluffy and thick legs had a close contact with Xiaowen's smooth flesh. Mr. He, actually I really like this house too. I wonder if there's a chance to stay here for a night. Xiaowen asked softly. In the future, there will be opportunities. There are too many things to do today. Jiang said without hesitation, and then sent Xiaowen out as a gift. He hurriedly returned to the alley and contacted the moving company to gradually load the things inside the house onto the truck. It has to be said that despite this small and short courtyard, there are quite a few things inside. 3 medium-sized trucks came in and out to load the entire house, which was a busy afternoon. This kind of commotion cannot be concealed from the neighbors nearby. These neighborhood friends who have been together for decades are all unbelievably gathered together and said, Hayatsi, are you really leaving? You don't want our yard, you don't want us neighborhood neighbors. When he thought about his past life and his own downfall, although these neighbors couldn't help but joke behind their backs, they often gave him a lot of help and asked him to eat at home. Jiang still had feelings for these neighbors, so he sincerely explained to them and said that although he didn't live together in the future, he would always be a neighbor or something. Xiao He, don't do such a foolish thing. A neighbor who was calling uncle he walked over and angrily cursed, Xiao He, how could you be so foolish? Don't you know that the Oldley family is still washing dishes in the United States? You are greedy for some money now and will sell this yard. In the future, you will find that you have suffered even more losses. How could you be so unreasonable? Listen to your Uncle Wang and settle the matter of selling the house immediately. Don't think so. This old house needs to be kept, this is the most profitable thing. You're selling for 1 billion now, and in 10 years, this place will be worth 1 billion. Uncle Wang said. He hesitated for a moment, wanting to tell Uncle Wang that in less than 10 years, this place will be designated as a cultural relic protection unit in 2 years, and external sales and transfers will be completely prohibited. Moreover, even without such rules, the overall housing prices in Yanjing will only increase by 1.5 times in 10 years. A courtyard house worth 100 million yuan can only be sold for 150 million yuan at most, and it is impossible for it to rise to 1 billion yuan. However, it was clearly impossible for Jiang to tell others these words, and he could only laugh them off as if he had not heard them. Since his words had no effect, Uncle Wang suddenly became even more sorrowful and indignant, saying, Old He, your descendants are unfilial. Selling your ancestral house will dig up the roots of your He family. Upon hearing that Uncle Wang had actually pulled on his parents, Jiang couldn't bear it anymore. He said to Uncle Wang seriously, Uncle Wang, the root of the He family is not a house, but me, Jiang. I, Jiang, am alive, and the roots of the He family are there. If I, Jiang, marry a wife and have children, then the roots of the He family can continue. If I have nothing and end up starving to death in this house, then the roots of the He family will really be extinct. Everyone suddenly had nothing to say. That night, after a busy day, Jiang finally lay in his new home. Although all the furniture in this house is ready-made, only the mattress is not ready-made, and all the daily necessities are not available. Jiang didn't bring the old mattress from home, but ordered a brand new set of mattresses. However, they won't be delivered until tomorrow. Today, Zheng can only roll up 2 blankets and make a bed on the ground. Even though he is about to become a billionaire and still lives in such an expensive villa, Zheng can only make a shop on the ground, which is an extraordinary feeling. And right beside Zheng, Biyao also made a floor mat. Although Zheng arranged a room for her, she said she couldn't bear to watch brother he make a floor mat alone in the living room and insisted on coming over to accompany him. Zheng didn't refuse, just sniffed a faint scent in the air and slowly fell asleep. It wasn't until early morning that Zheng felt a sensation again. He slowly opened his eyes and found. Well, Biyao slept well in her own bed and didn't do the same thing as last day. It's just that her sleeping posture isn't very good, with 2 pure white arms and half of her shoulders exposed bare to us. That's right, it's naked. There's nothing on my arms and shoulders, inside the blanket. Okay, Zheng damn well found himself unable to sleep. End of this chapter.